Welcome to Miscellaneous Productions Film for Beginners with Marie Fleming with special guest moderator, Kat Jamie. Before we begin, let us take a moment to please acknowledge where we are. Miscellaneous Productions is presenting this event today on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded, that means stolen, territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It is an honor to present film, theater, dance, music, and performance art on their lands and the lands of their ancestors. Their cultures have left a lasting legacy for us to learn from and to cherish. We live and work on unceded, stolen Coast Salish territories. We endeavor to honor the land and its treaties by strengthening our relationship and responsibilities to the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people across Turtle Island. The presence of settlers, non-Indigenous people who live on stolen and unceded lands is not neutral. It has had and continues to have devastating effects on many aspects of life, art, and culture for Indigenous people. Settler colonialism has suppressed and harmed Coast Salish people, whether they be land-based or of the sea and sky. We hold this understanding in our interactions and engagements with this land and its people. Those of us who are settlers need to recognize that our knowledge and way of doing things may not be the priority as we work towards equality for everyone in the region. Because we are gathering in a digital space, we would like to encourage and invite everyone to take a moment and reflect upon the land you are on and your relationship to it and how that looks as you acknowledge your ancestry. We would like to humbly thank and honor the Coast Salish people for stewarding the land we occupy, which has been territory, land, sea, and sky, from which our artistic community has grown. My name is Elaine Carroll, and I am the Artistic Director of Miscellaneous Productions, producer of this very special film event with Marie Fleming. On behalf of our staff, board, and young performers, I would like to thank you so much for attending this presentation. We would like to thank our funders. Our special funder for this event is Creative BC in their film department. For our staff, our funders are the Canada Council for the Arts, BC Gaming, City of Vancouver Office of Arts and Culture, Vancouver Foundation, and many generous individuals. Thank you so much, funders. We would also like to thank our main community partner, the Dance Center. Thank you so much to the many exceptionally talented people working behind the scenes, including our volunteer board of directors and fantastic professional team. At Miscellaneous Productions, we believe all youth have the right to the highest quality, comprehensive professional training in the performing arts, regardless of cultural background, income level, or experience. And now I would like to introduce our community support worker, Alex Denard, who will present the group agreement for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. We ask that all of you participating in today's event respect our anti-harassment policy. We request that attendees refrain from harassment of any sort, including, but not limited to, visuals or images of any kind, language, comments, or questions that are of a racist, homophobic, sexist, sexual, or threatening nature. This includes actions that disrupt or interfere in any way with other attendees or presenters' ability to participate. We do not tolerate harassment of any kind and will immediately disconnect and block any offenders from the event. It is my pleasure to now introduce today's moderator, Kat Jamie. Kat Jamie is an award-winning filmmaker based in Vancouver, BC, who's passionate about telling meaningful personal stories. After graduating with a BFA in 2011, Kat worked at the National Film Board of Canada, where she coordinated and oversaw over 30 documentaries, animations, and digital projects through all stages of production. While at the National Film Board of Canada, she completed Paradise Island in 2015, which was nominated for 2 Leos and screened at the 2015 Cannes Short Film Corner. Her latest project, Finding Big Country, screened to sold-out theaters across North America and won the prestigious Audience Choice Award at the Vancouver International Film Festival in 2018. Welcome, Kat, and thank you so much for moderating today's event.
Thanks so much, Alex, and thank you to Miscellaneous Productions for hosting this awesome event. I'm super excited to be here and to be chatting with Marie Fleming, and I will just read a very awesome bio. So just hold on as I get things organized here. So I'm so super stoked and happy to introduce Anne-Marie Fleming. So a Vancouver-based Anne-Marie Fleming has been making award-winning independent animated documentary fiction and hybrid film for over 30 years. Born in Japan of Chinese and Australian parentage, her films often deal with themes of family, history, and memory, and blended identities. Her 2016 animated feature, Window Horses, which takes place in Iran, won Best Animated Feature at the Asian Pacific Screen Awards, Best Canadian and BC Film at the Vancouver International Film Festival, the Audience Award from Anima Sirios in Greece, Best Animated Feature at the Stuttgart International Animation Festival, and Best Screenplay from the Vancouver Critics Circle, amongst others. Her animated doc, You Take Care Now, is on the Toronto International Film Festival's, or TIFF's, Essential Cinema list for top 10 Canadian short films of all time. Her dark comedy, The French Guy, won Best Dramatic Feature at the Boston Underground Film Festival. Her animated adaptation of Bernice Eisenstein's I Was a Child of Holocaust Survivors was named on TIFF's top 10 list, Best Animated Film, at the Reel to Reel Youth Festival at Montreal's Michael Moskowitz Award for Film with a Jewish Theme. She created her latest animated doc, a short film about Tegan and Sarah, a portrait of LGBTQ+ activist sisters and pop icons for the Governor General's Award in 2018 and in 2019. Made Question Period, a short doc where recent Syrian refugee women reflect on the Canadian society they find themselves in. Her graphic novel adaptation of her feature-length animated doc, The Magical Life of Longtack Sam, was nominated for 2 Eisner Awards and won the Doug Wright Award for Best Canadian Comic. Anne-Marie created the Animation Award at Toronto Reel's Asian Film Festival, which celebrates Asian Canadian animated filmmakers. So as you can see, we're talking to a prolific and award-winning filmmaker, and I'm super excited to be chatting with Anne-Marie about all her films, 4 films that we'll be, 5 films that we will be watching and discussing. And so, Anne-Marie, do you want to I know we're going to watch a clip and then we'll get into your backstory and whatnot, but is there anything that you want to say before we pop into the first film that we're going to discuss?
Well, I just like to say hello, and for all the people who are joining us, thank you for spending some time with Kat and me today. Not all my films are animated, but I'm going to start off with one. It's an autobiography, and maybe we should just go into it. It's got a long, long backstory.
Okay,
so why don't we just show the film? Okay. I went to Emily Carr. Just to say, I went to art school after already studying other things. So I went back sort of as a mature student, but this film may not show how mature I was.
Awesome. So this is just a 90 sec. So I'll just give you a quick synopsis of this film. So it's called So Far So, and we're going to be watching a 90-second clip of it, and the film is a 90-second animated autobiography. So Katja, if you could please play the first clip. So I think we are, I guess we're just going to chat a bit. Maybe Anne-Marie, if you can just tell me sort of just a quick, brief introduction and inspiration behind the film that we're about to watch.
Right. Well, I'm an immigrant, right? And so, and from a generation where you could be interested in the arts, but the arts wasn't a possible career path. And there was very little opportunity to work in animation in Vancouver. That seems so crazy now because it's such a booming business, right? So when I went back to art school to go into animation, it was quite a detour from where I thought I was going to go. And when and I wasn't really a great drawer, right? So and I don't have a lot of patience. And also I was hit and run over by 2 cars after my first year in art school. So So Far So is what I drew when I was in a wheelchair, and it represents all the strength I had up until that moment. It's a very simple gestural style of animation, and it's that simple because it represents all the strength I had.
Okay, got it. So just to add more backstory. So how much animation background did you have prior to drawing this? Like what year were you in animation or at Emily Carr?
Right. Well, it was a 3-year program, and I drew it in my second year. And the date on it actually is a few years later, because this was a time when we had to draw on paper and shoot on film and process on film. And this was all really expensive. And I was just a student. I didn't have the money to finish it till a few years after I graduated, actually.
So this is a great point. Sorry, I was just about to say that's a great point about how some films you'll start, but we'll have to put it on, put it on the shelf or put it on pause and have to come back to it, either when you have the money to finish it or the time or the resource or the access. So that's a great, I think, nugget for anyone who wants to start making films. So we do have a question here. So Anne-Marie, what inspired you to go back to school?
Well, it was interesting. I was doing some traveling, and I was in England visiting a relative, my uncle, and in the middle of the night, a seagull fell on my head, and it was all wrapped up in fishing line. Apparently, it had flown through some trees by Hampstead Heath, and it got caught up in this fishing line, and it fell on me. And then I went to see a film by Peter Greenaway called A Z in 2 Knots. It's an old film, but it had, this is how the film starts. It has birds falling out of the sky on these women. And it also dealt with all these themes that I had been interested in, and even had images that I had from my own dreams. I saw my own dreams in this film, and I thought, oh my goodness, I really, really want to be making films. I want to be putting the images that I have in my head on the screen, because maybe they can touch somebody, like this film has reached out to me, I really wanted to have a conversation with people.
I love it. That's such a, what a, like a symbolic coincidence. That's amazing. So I think we're ready for the clip to be played. So we'll chat after we watch this clip from So Far So. I love this short, Anne-Marie. And what I think was so great is that in such a short amount of time, you're really truly telling your life story. And so do you have any tips on how, like, and I think this is true of all your work, how you can tell a story in like such a short amount of time, and that's such a skill. And I'm wondering if you have any tips on, how to go about what's your process, and do you have any tips for aspiring filmmakers?
Well, it's absolutely true that writing long form is so different from writing short form or to making something small. And even though that is my entire life, I would say that a general rule is don't try to say too much. Try to, if you can say one thing, clearly in a film, then I think that's pretty successful, right? Like it may expand, but I would say really focus on the one thing you want to get across.
I love that. So yeah, and I think that's so true. Especially because filmmaking, as you know, is such a grind that you really have to be passionate about that one message that you want to share with the audience to kind of sustain you from the year. So actually, how long did this take you to make it? Was it 3 years?
Well, it was 4 years to get the film made, but it was 2 weeks to draw it.
Okay.
And actually, that was always my plan. Is I thought there used to be these little educational interstitials called Multiplication Rock and ABC Rock and Schoolhouse Rock that used to be on Saturday morning cartoons. I love little educational and animated shorts, and that's what I thought I would want to do. But I wanted to show So Far So because it'll go into the next clip, which of course I've done so many things with Stick Girl. She's been in so many films with me, and she's made webisodes, and she's had an iPhone app, and now she recently starred in her first feature film. So yeah, and so if I could say anything, like I'm not an amazing drawer. I mean, I can do more than sticks, but I'm not an amazing animator. But you don't have to be, right? Like you can just do it. And I think that if you have intention and integrity, what you're trying to say will come across, and people will be able to relate to it.
I love that, because I'm not a drawer, but that gives me inspiration to maybe try my hand at an animation one day. But yeah, this is great. I also wanted to show So Far So because it leads us into our next film, Window Horses. But before that, we're just going to take a few questions. And just so everyone knows, we're going to try to get to all the questions, but we might not be able to get to everyone's question, but we'll do our best. So our next question is, what do you enjoy about writing animation, and how is it different from writing feature films?
I think that every story has its own way of being told. Like some things aren't films at all, like maybe they're songs, or maybe they're poems, or maybe they're a meal. Maybe they're just a conversation. And so what's fantastic about animation is that anything is possible, anything, right? But otherwise, I approach it quite similarly. I don't think is this for animation particularly. And when I'm doing something like So Far So, which is pretty unusual, being a student and not having to adhere to a certain time frame, right? And I just threw animated. A lot of ideas were occurring to me as I drew, right? Like I do a little storyboard. This didn't have a script, but it did have a storyboard, which is like basically just little pictures of how you're thinking this film is going to look. But in the process of making, it changes.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question for you. If Greenway was an early influence, who else influenced you in your filmmaking practice?
Oh, well, so when I came back to Canada, I saw this film by Atta Magoyan, right? Family Viewing. And I was so excited by the conversation. I just wanted to have a conversation with this filmmaker, with this film, with these ideas. And so I'd say those are two really, they were two really big films for me. It's interesting looking at them now. I don't have the same relationship to them, but they both really spoke to who I was in that moment. And they were like integral in me deciding that I was going to put together, a portfolio and apply to Emily Carr to go to art school.
And did you ever get a chance to talk to Adam?
Yes, yes, I took a low budget feature writing course from him after I graduated. And yes, Atom was very supportive of some of my earlier work. Like he's such a great guy. He's just the nicest person on the planet, as well as being, you know, so smart and having such an amazing career outside of film too. Like he's done opera, he's done all these other things. He's just somebody who's very interested in the world, you know. And I did meet Peter Greenaway too. I got to meet Peter Greenaway, and all I can really remember is that he wore very thin socks. It was, and he said that his purpose was to try and teach visual literacy. He felt that he wanted to bring the visual arts to a wider audience. And so when you see his films with that in mind, and then you see all of the artistic references that he uses, that's you know, an interesting piece of information.
And how did you meet Peter?
Peter?
Yeah. First name basis.
Well, I was invited to go to the Canadian Film Centre in Toronto, and he was one of the guest speakers there through the Toronto Film Festival. And also I met him again here. There was a film that was done by Screen Sirens, which is a Vancouver female-led company. And so they had him here because he was their director.
That's so great. Yeah, it's always so special when you meet someone whose work you've admired and whose work has inspired your work. And it's also even better when they turn out to be really nice people as well. So that's very cool. We are now going to watch a clip from another film of Emery's called Window Horses. It's a feature-length animation, which I worked on this project as a production coordinator. That's actually how Emery and I connected years and years, well, not years and years ago, but kind of years and years ago. That's how I started my career in filmmaking. And we'll get to talk about, you know, jobs and how to get started later on during this talk, Emery. So I had, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, from just before the break, is that a big reason why I went into film was because, and I think this is the reason a lot of people go in, is that I didn't see my stories out there. I wanted to acknowledge, you know, what I went through, how I saw things, what my point of view was. And film is just an amazing soapbox, really. It's a great way that you can present yourself, you know, how you want to be presented. You know, so that I got to say that that's a big part of it.
And I love that. And I think it's so true. Now more than ever, we need, you know, our voices to be in front of the camera, behind the camera. So, and I think all your work really reflects that goal of yours. So with that being said, we're just going to watch a 2-minute, I think this is the trailer for Window Horses. And then we're going to get to chat about it. So, Katja, if you could please play Window Horses.
Wow, Rosie, a book. Rosie is the poet.
Oh my God, you're published?
It's no big deal. It's just a little book of poems I printed. There's one more thing. I've been invited to
Poetry festival in Iran?
Iran?
Yes, they found me. They found my work.
They found you?
I have to go. Come on, you think I've never been away before?
You've never been away before.
Reason for visit.
I'm a poet.
Iran is the land of poets.
Our next performer this morning is Rosie Ming.
Salam. My father was Persian.
He must be very proud of you.
So, your father is Persian?
My father abandoned me when I was 7.
But you are looking for his story, yes? So, you will find it everywhere.
Ask your question.
I've got my question.
Open the book and choose a poem.
How
is it everybody here knows everything about everything?
The more you learn about others, the more you deepen your understanding of yourself. This is the journey we are all on.
I love this film, and I guess I forgot to preface that clip with a short synopsis, so I will say it now, and then we can chat about the inspiration and what it's, how you got the idea, etc. So Wind of Horses is about a young Canadian poet who travels to a festival in Iran searching for the father she thought abandoned her when she was a little girl. So yeah, Anne-Marie, can you just kind of just tell us and explain sort of the backstory and the inspiration for the film? And for those of you who put two and two together, the main character is based of Stick Girl, who is in So Far So. So it's really cool to see the evolution of Stick Girl and how she follows you from project to project.
Right. Well, this is very complicated, but I seem to be like an eternal student, and I was invited to an artist residency in Germany. This is a long time ago. It's like in the mid-90s. And this is where I came up with the idea of this story. I was living with all of these people who were from diasporas from all over the world. It was an international artist residency. And I was also listening to the story of the Second World War from the point of view of Germans who had lived through it, right? And who, I was hearing about regardless of what had happened to them, what they'd suffered, what they experienced, what their politics or views were, they were really discriminated against in the rest of the world for a very long time. And I'd never heard it from that side before. And I was also introduced there to the poetry of Rumi. Rilke, who's a German poet, had brought Rumi to Germany many, many years ago. And I used to read these poems every morning, kind of like an oracle. And I started off writing a story, which was a father-son relationship. It was live action, and it happened in Germany. And fast forward, 15 years, and I still have this idea in my head, but now I'm in Vancouver and I'm meeting people from the Iranian diaspora, and I'm hearing all of their stories, I guess, of what happened to families after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And I just saw so many similarities between what I'd been hearing from people all over the world and now Iran and about here where I lived. And it was impossible to do this as a live action film. In fact, Canada had cut off all diplomatic relationships with Iran at the time. And so I wanted to do it as animation because I wanted it to be centrally about poetry and how poetry brings us together across cultures, across the millennia, across all kinds of divides. Of course, there's all of these issues about appropriation. Here I am going into a culture that is not my own at all. And I felt that I had to embed myself actually in the story to be, I don't know, just extra committed, I'm implanted in the story. And so I got Stick Girl to be the lead, and she's half Iranian and half Chinese, like I'm half Chinese and half other things, right? And I got Sandra Oh to voice her, like she's never really had a voice before. And so she goes on this little trip. And so it's not really, I'm not speaking for, Iranians. This is a point of view of somebody who is trying to be open to the world and discovers herself through discovering this other culture, right? And so people ask me, like, why is it a Stick Girl? Like, why is she different from everybody else, And I would say that it was intuitive at first, but then I realized how instrumental it was because, she's still forming. She could be anything. And everybody is so kind to her. She's the outsider, she's not looking at others. She's always the other. And I think that we all feel like that sometimes, like we are the odd person, no matter where we are, sometimes within our own family, right? And so she's able to go through this this land and meet all these people, and everybody's just so kind to her, you know, everybody's just so nice, and they want to teach her, they want to help her learn, right? And I think that she's just so simple that you can put anything on her, right? She doesn't remind you of somebody or something or anything like that. She's just she's free.
I love that. Actually, yeah, that's such a beautiful and great point. There's just two things that I also wanted to mention, if just in case the terms aren't super familiar, but live action. Do you want to maybe just define what live action is for people who might not know what that means?
Oh, well, you know, I'm just defining what people think of as film, which is just regular photography, camera work, right? And animation is anything that's frame by frame manipulation, and in this case totally created created in the computer.
Thank you. And I thought it was so cool that Sandra Oh, I remember when there was talks about her in the office about, you know, we want to get Sandra Oh to play the voice of Stick Girl. And again, for those of you who might not be familiar, but Sandra Oh is a Canadian actress who has starred in Grey's Anatomy, and Killing Eve is another show that she's stars in, and she's fantastic. And it's so great to have her in this project.
Yeah, and she's like a Canadian indie queen too, right?
Yeah,
like she's been in all of Mina Shum's films, like Meditation Park and Double Happiness, and you know. But yes, Sandra and I were supposed to do a film way back, and it didn't happen. And I went to Germany, and she went to the States and became kind of a household name on Grey's Anatomy for 10 years. And I just, I called her up and asked, you know, would she do a voice for me? You know, it would only take a couple hours. And I didn't realize that she had just walked off of 10 years of Grey's Anatomy. So I caught her in this beautiful sweet spot, and she came on. She wanted to help me make the film. And in fact, you know, it's very low budget. It's much larger budget than anything I've dealt with, but it was really her participation that got other people interested. It started off as an Indiegogo campaign because I couldn't get money from anywhere else. Like the NFB had actually turned me down several times for years. And then like Telefilm, the NFB, like other people looked and went, oh my goodness, this is getting made, right? And it's got all this social media attention, and you know, Sandra was doing press for it all over the place all the time, and it really got people excited. And that's how I got it made. It's really so much has to do with Sandra.
I love that. And so I think this is another great point for emerging filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers to know, is that, you know, it's okay if people say no to you. You kind of just have to keep that fire alive and keep, you know, if you believe in a film or a project or a message, you kind of just have to be, you know, you have to spearhead it for even, and there might be times when people say no, and big institutions or organizations might pass, but then, you know, you still have to continue to do the work, and then they might come on board later on.
Yeah. And as I said, like, this has changed so much. It hasn't fundamentally changed what I was trying to say, but the route that I took and how the final expression is just so different. And time is sometimes your friend, because you learn more stuff. And it is all timing when it comes to getting something supported. You should never, ever take no. Well, no is so good. Like no is the best, because if you hear it, then you shouldn't do it, right? If you don't hear no, if you just try and find another way to do it, then that's what you should be working on. Because, you know, as you know, film is just really, really hard. It's really hard. Mm-hmm. But there's always a way.
There's always a way. Another thing that I love that you mentioned, and I think it's another really important nugget, is that like you were aware that you weren't coming from this background, and just having that awareness as a filmmaker as to like, what stories can we tell? Are we, you know, is this my story to tell? And how can we be respectful of, you know, telling this story? So is there any advice that you can give?
Yeah. Do you have permission to tell the story? Right. And who can give you that permission? It's complicated, and it's contextual, and it changes all the time. For Window Horses, I had tons of consultants, right? I had people. I wrote it, but I at the script level, for the poetry, for the music, for the animation, even simple things changed over time from when I wrote it. There were norms that changed, right? For example, no smoking in public places in Iran. So I was going to have something so simple, but I was going to have lots of smoke in the airport scene because that would have been normal. But then suddenly, oh no, no smoke, or no ties. You can't wear a tie because that's seen as anti-revolutionary, right? Like a tie represents the old times. Little things like this, and from different generations of people too, because they have different, they have different ideas, different memories, and also from all over Iran. Iran is a huge country with lots of different cultures, right? So I think I do go overboard. I'm so scared. I think scared is the right word. I go into every culture with a lot of anxiety about, am I doing this correctly? Am I representing you correctly? And that includes the culture of my own family sometimes, right? That can be the scariest culture to go into, because I think you have a huge responsibility to your subject matter, regardless of what your presentation is going to be.
And I think that's responsibility. I think as filmmakers, that's what a lot of people don't realize, like how we are responsible to, our subjects who trust us to tell their stories, or, whether it's the culture that we're trying to represent or trying to tell a story about. So I feel like there's, and I think this is, you touched on this, but there's so much work that goes into the research that goes into understanding. And does that come from, like, are you reading articles? Are you talking to people? Like, how does one gain, how do you prepare, I guess? And how did you figure out about the ties and all that other stuff?
Well, it's different for different projects, right? But this particular project, I mean, writers are crows, right? We just collect things. So it's people's stories. There's so many stories in there. They're not even all Iranian stories, right? There are stories from a lot of different people that I know, mixed up with some imagination, a lot of research. I just check all the time. I do pass things by people all the time, and try and get some sort of general consensus about how I'm doing. I mean, I don't think of it as me censoring myself for what I want to do. I just think that I'm just doing my due diligence. So if there's something in there that might be a little contentious, I know what it is and I know what it's doing there, right? Like, you just have to be as responsible, to use that word again, as you can for what you're doing. And it's not even just in the storytelling. Like, if you're just, you're making a comedy and you're using actors, like the actors too, like it's their face, right? Like, they are trusting you to do well by them, right? Like, there's so much trust involved, because the filmmaker in some ways, I mean, can hide, right? It's who are you showing? Who's out there taking the heat?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Yeah, so true. We hold a lot of power. Maria, yeah, storytellers do hold a lot of power. We have just a few more minutes to chat before we go into our next Q&A. I did want to ask you, so how long did it take you again? So I know that you said that you started with an Indiegogo campaign, like, just to give people a time frame for how long a project like this can take.
Wow. Well, I don't want to depress people with how long it takes, because it probably takes longer than some people have been alive. But when I actually said, yes, we're making the film, it happened very quickly. For animation, it's feature animation, right? So I worked with artists all across the country. We all just worked from home like this. We all just worked on our, laptop computers, right? And this is before the pandemic. So it's interesting because a lot of animation is now done from people's homes, right? But the Indiegogo campaign was quite long. It was like 3 or 4 months. And in that time, Sandra and I were going all over the place, doing all the voice records and everything. It was about a year and a half of production of animation and finishing things up. And then it was about a year and a half of traveling around trying to go to festivals and show people the film and talk it up. So it was pretty fast for an animated film. It was less than 2 years. But for me trying to get the animated film made, that was more like 8 years. And from the idea, that was more like 20 years. Yeah.
So yeah, I love these stories though. It's just when it's just, you have to tell a story when you can't stop thinking about it. And I feel like, this is what that film is. And I'm so happy that you got it made. So
I'm so happy that that's how you met me.
Yeah, I know. I always get because I think this might have been my first feature animation that I worked on. So I get super excited when I see the credits and production coordinator Kat Jamie's on there. So yeah, I'm very happy to have been a part of the process, even if it was just for a little bit and mainly towards the end. But
not a lot of feature animation gets made, and especially not in Canada. And I think it was the first time the NFB had been involved in one for like over 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So it is a big deal. And the reason why I was able to make it was because I was unaware that it was a big deal, right? So it was really my cluelessness that allowed me to go forward and do this, So there is a certain strength in not knowing too much, right? Like beginner's mind, as like they say in meditation, beginner's mind is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I could totally see why that would be important, especially at the beginning of your career. So just a few questions, Anne-Marie, that we have in our Q&A. So what advice would you give to someone with writer's or creative block?
Oh my goodness. I am in the biggest block right now. I've been working on this project like literally for 20 years, and every day I go to the computer, and sometimes nothing happens. And if you know how to break it, please write to me. I'll give you my email. What I do, like I'm really prolific, and I think it's because I have writer's block all the time. So I keep on moving, but maybe not in the direction I think I move, the direction that I thought I was going to be moving in. I do other projects, I do other things. I just like to stay creative, and I like to stay making things. It makes me happy. And that always, it always adds back to the project that you're having the problems with. Like if you have the luxury, I guess it's a luxury of not having a deadline, right? Like something that you have to deliver. Sometimes writer's block is actually your friend. It's an obstacle, and it will lead to different kinds of strategies than would have happened if you were just able to run right through it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm saying this to cheer myself up right now, because it's so hard. I often find writing relatively enjoyable. And so it's been really tough for me to be stuck, and I've been stuck for months. So I think it's just normal. It's just part of the creative process, and you just gotta, flow with it.
The creative process. Yeah, no, for sure. Another question that we have for you is, how do you work with professional actors like Sandra Oh? Do you block them precisely or leave them to develop all their on-screen work on their own?
Well, for animation, it's so exciting. I got to work with a bunch of A-list actors, and because there's no camera, there's no blocking, they don't need hair and makeup. They're not worried about how they look. They come in, they're totally casual. They're completely professional. You can play with them, right? There's time to play because, of course, time is money. And when you've got 40 people or, 80 people on a film set waiting for you to set up a shot, that can be very nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. So it's just such a pleasure to work with actors. Like, I love actors, and everybody's different, right? Like some people need a lot more direction. Other people they can just do it. And then say, you want another one? How do you want me to change it? Right? Like I can do this, I can do that. Like everybody's got a different style. They're just people, right? And everybody's got their own process. What's so great too is that when they're reading from the script, they're reading all your words. It's very exciting because on set, like it could be for different reasons. It could be that they're having there could be an artistic disagreement, or it could be that they're just not great at memorizing, right? Like on set, you have to do take after take after take to try and get what both of you are happy with. I just find like with anything, the higher up you get, like the more professional, the more experience, people just generally get nicer. Like, because they're so confident in what they do, right? And they know that it's an exchange. Like in some ways it's a gift. They've shown up for you and they just want respect because they're giving you a lot by being there, like I think the bigger people get in some ways, the less ego there is, if that makes any sense.
That does, and that's great to hear that's been your that's been your experience. Sorry, and so I'm curious as to with Sandra Oh, how many days were you guys in the studio recording her voice then? And was it just like all in one chunk, or did you guys? Okay, yeah.
Well, what Sandra did for the project was amazing. I mean, a lot of the actors came on because of Sandra, because of their respect for Sandra, right? The bigger actors. And so because animation, often people just do it by themselves, right? They just go through the whole script. Maybe the director would sit in and do the other voices or whatever. But Sandra was there in the room for every single recording. And because Rosie Ming, her character, is in every scene, right? So she was there for everybody. And so it was like scene work. It was really nice. She was so generous. It's incredible.
And I think that it also brings another I'm going to keep calling them nuggets, but that's when you're trying to make something and it's you're just getting started, you sometimes just need that one person.
Yes. That
opens all the doors for you. And that's, with Finding Big Country, or when I'm, making this documentary about the Grizzlies, there's so many people who are hesitant to talk about stuff, but when you kind of name drop and you kind of are just like, okay, well, I have this person, this person, this person, this person on board, using them as leverage, but also using them as like, this film is being made and we are telling the story. Do you want your voice to be a part of it? Because, I have all these other people on board who are going to tell the story. So, do you want to be involved? Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting. You kind of have to find that one person that is like one of the key people that can, again, open all the doors for you. And Sandra, it seems like, was one of the people for you in this project.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you're making your first film, you don't have to worry about that. But then sometimes you do. Like if you're not in school and you don't have access to like free crew and, free equipment and all this stuff, when you have to build it and convince people that you're serious, sometimes you do need like some guardian angel coming in and saying, I believe in this person, right? But it's always like that. And it's, on some level, it's always like that. And it's always, it's always difficult. It's always like starting again. I've done a lot of stuff, but it's always a big rock to push. Like who will come on, right? And funders more and more, well, they want to know who are the actors, even if it is animation, even if it's just voices, they want to know who's involved.
I had another question, and I'm gonna start writing things down when I think of it. But what was my question? I'm drawing a blank. We have a minute before our next break. I guess so. You touched on this, and you were saying, with your first film, you don't need to make, I think if you're just starting out, you don't have to make this like grand feature film or, feature animation. What would your tip be for someone who is, wants to get into filmmaking, wants to start to be a filmmaker? Is there any like a short film? What should they be focusing on? And do you have any tips for someone who wants to start in film?
Well, I mean, it's such a different time now than when I was in film, where you needed very expensive equipment, you know, where the process was so expensive. I mean, um, anybody, well, can borrow, beg, borrow, or steal, like the you know, the camera on the most basic of camera phones now has so much higher resolution than what we were working on in film, right? So and people are so visually literate now, and there's so many ways to consume film. So I think that the audiences, like people who are like emerging filmmakers now, they've seen so much more kinds of stuff, right, than used to be available in popular culture, like just because of the internet, right? Like people have seen everything. There isn't one, so everybody knows there's not just one way of telling a story, not one kind of documentary, not one kind of way of telling a drama. You know, it's pretty exciting because film can be anything, right? It can be anything, it can be any length, and you know, people are playing around now finally with different formats too, like, you know, not just with the rectangle. So so I would say, you know, I keep on saying how hard it is, but it's also not hard. Just do it. Do something, you know, like prepare to fail. Just do it, right? Like don't because you're learning, right? You're just learning. It's the first thing you do or the 89th thing you do may not be brilliant, but you're always learning. And I would say, look at stuff that you don't like or that you think isn't working, that you think has failed in some ways, because you learn so much from that, right? Like sometimes when things just look like they work, you don't know why they work, but you can know why they didn't work. I mean, it's hard to make a great film and everybody has the best intentions, right? But it's great to see when, you know, it's great to see the cracks sometimes.
Welcome back from that break. I know before we get started on this next clip, Anne-Marie just wanted to say a few more things.
Oh yeah, just I had some great ideas on the break. I wanted to say that the reason why Sandra Oh agreed to do Window Horses is she was really moved by the story. She thought it was pro-girl, she thought it was pro-art, and also it featured a mixed race person, which you don't see a lot of in animation. Her nieces are mixed race, and she wanted to support a project that, you know, in some ways represented them. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, you know, when you make your films, get them up, get them out there, you know, like you can wait around to try and sell things if you think that's the direction you want to go. But I would really suggest you just, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have them already, get a YouTube channel, you know, it's free, get stuff out there, get followers. If you're ever going to get funding, or if you go into places like the NFB, like people like to see that you've taken initiative, that people are watching you, that you come with an audience, you sort of proof of concept that people are interested in what you got to say. Of course, I'm really bad at doing all this, but you know, do what I say, not what I do. Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much for that. Okay, so we're just going to watch a clip from another short that Anne-Marie directed called You Take Care Now, and we'll chat about it right after.
I'm starting now. Close your eyes and think of a hotel room in Brindisi. You're sitting at a desk looking out the window onto the street below. It's siesta time and there's not a lot going on out there. You're writing an entry in your journal. If you're having trouble visualizing, it looks like this. You've been traveling on a train for the past 3 days from Switzerland on down to the heel of Italy, trying to make it to Greece before your Eurail pass expires. You haven't washed or slept in all that time. It's early in the morning and you have all day to wait for a night boat to the Peloponnesus. The friend you met on the train has gone back to some other town to pick up a machine part he forgot. It's September. Tourist season is over. And you're alone in a city everyone has been telling you is the armpit of the world. The travel agent takes pity on you and offers you his place to crash, have a shower, store your stuff. He calls a cab to take you there. The driver knows the place. Oh, I almost forgot. You're female, and you're 22. So, you're writing after a lunch of fresh steamed prawns and enough coffee in your body that you feel yourself burning inside. You're in his room. You want to leave, but you just can't think. So you stay anyway, because you don't trust your intuition. And then the locked door turns open and the first fire starts. Now, the next bit is a little hard to explain. You get the idea, don't you? You get raped. Now, you're lying there, waiting for something violent to happen, to be hit or beaten, or for yourself to do something like scream or fight or maybe pull out that ever-handy Swiss Army knife. But nothing like that passes, because you're afraid you might hurt him, or you're afraid he might get angry and hurt you, or he'll call the police and tell them that you stole something and you don't speak Italian, and you've heard all about the police.
Okay, so Anne-Marie, I keep making the mistake by not giving the one-line synopsis before the films. So I'll do that now. But so you take care now is a personal essay about two particular traumas: being raped and run over. So Anne-Marie, before we get into the questions that I have, is there anything that you wanted to share about the film before that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I made this film because I wanted to make another film. It was called New Shoes, an interview in exactly 5 minutes, where a friend of mine was, she was gunned down in an unsuccessful murder-suicide by her ex-fiance. And obviously it was a story that she had not shared publicly. And I needed to do something to make her trust me, right? And so I thought that I had to put myself on the line and really open myself up with my own traumas to show her this is the way I would deal with it, and that I'm willing to show myself, right? I'm not asking you to be up there alone, right? And I think it's in some ways the same thing that I say with actors or cultures or anything, is that I feel that I had to be implicated in this. And also, it's very much a film about acknowledgement, and it's my story through my eyes. It's my point of view, and it was interesting because I would go around to a lot of festivals. I was so surprised. This film goes everywhere, right? It's still taught in schools. It's still taught in media studies classes. It touches a lot of people. It's on, the TIFF top 10 lists. It's crazy because for me it's an experimental film, and it's so achingly personal, right? But people would come up to me and they would just want to share their stories, right? It gave them permission to speak. It gave them permission to tell their own tales. And so, it's an old film. I made that in 1988, right? That's when I wrote it. And originally it was going to be a straight animated film that I drew. And I was given some criticism by my animation instructor, who he said, because my drawing skills weren't that strong, or, he made some comment. And this has happened to me a bunch of times. Like, usually I ignore things, but I heard this one. He felt that the way that I would present it might be taken the wrong way. And that because I was dealing with such sensitive subject matter, at least for him, it made him uncomfortable, right? I had to find a way to be able to tell my story and get people to come closer so they would hear it and not turn away from it, right? So some people think that this is like, it's very confessional, like diary-esque, but it's not. It is a construction. And the way that I tell the story is made so that you can hear the story, if that makes any sense.
For sure. And sorry, I know that we just showed a quick clip. Is there if people wanted to watch the full thing, is there a way to watch the full thing?
Yeah, I think if you go to just Google "You Take Care Now," it should come up either my Vimeo or YouTube. People have put it up on YouTube.
Okay. Because I think, it is such a film that sits with you and that invites the viewer to watch. And you as a viewer, I feel like you feel like that it is this personal space that you're being invited to, just with your narration and the way that you mix, because it's a mixture of like animation, and also like, would you call it like not recreate, but because you're recreating some of the spaces, right, that you've shot, or
Oh, well, well, in the second half of the film where I'm run over, so I get an ambulance to treat me like a suspected spinal injury, right? And so there's little things like that, but it started off with an image, and the image was of this woman shrouded on the beach. That's how it started. And then I just started collecting more images, right? And also the boxer, I have like a frame from Raging Bull in there later at the end. It was, but again, I had that luxury, I had that privilege of being in school, being able to explore, being able to have time, I had 8 months to, I guess maybe I made it in about 5 months to try what worked, what didn't work, but the text never changed. I recorded that, and it was just the images that kept moving.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open up to questions. And so, how powerful do you think it is to make art about hard topics? And do you think art makes these topics more accessible?
Well, it's really hard, and it's really important. And yes, it is all about making these topics accessible. It's about, it's about sharing it so people know that they're not alone, right? I think it's essential. I mean, I think that's what art does. Art shows us to each other, right? Art reframes what is out there in the world, right? It's seeing things in a different way through someone else's lens. Like, I think, there's a lot of hard topics out there. There's a lot of hard topics. There's a lot of voices, who want to be heard. There's a lot of voices. But I think that's what, I think as artists, that's what, that's why we do it. That's why we want to share. Yeah.
And so I just had another question, and that is, what would you tell people who are thinking of inserting themselves, or thinking of telling a personal story, but might be afraid to?
Obviously I made that film before the age of the internet, before the age of the troll, right? Where the only person that would confront me would have to confront me in person, right? So I think you have to be really, really brave, you have to be really brave. And just from looking around, that there are people that are going to attack you, maybe make fun of you, that can happen. I have to say that with my films, like I would say 90%, 99% of the time, for the very hard subject matter that I can deal with, I have only had welcoming responses. People have been very sympathetic, and I don't mean sympathetic like, I just mean they are very respectful of the work, right? So I have been attacked for some things, right? That it's always shocking. It's always shocking. And I have to retreat and lick my wounds and come out again. But I've never been attacked in a way that it makes me want to stop speaking, right? Yeah, there's a little bit of bravery involved. But I think that, like anything, you have to choose, why am I saying it? How important is it? Right? And you'll know. you'll know, and you'll get to say it in your own voice. No interruptions, right? People can talk afterwards, but you got to say your piece.
A lot of bravery, not just a little. I feel like there's, a lot of bravery. And yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's an important story, especially today, for people to watch. So, if you are able to search for You Take Care Now, I recommend everyone do that. So we're going to just switch gears here for a little bit and just chat about just picking your brain about how to, I know this is what we've been doing, but kind of going maybe into more detail. Actually, there's another question that goes into this, because we're going to talk about how to make films, especially when you're just starting in your career. So we're going to have another question here that relates to this, and that is, can you recommend any free apps or programs for anyone starting to make films with just the camera on their phone?
Well, iMovie, like if you have access to a Mac, I'm a Mac girl. So there's a, I'm so sorry. I work with, prosumer, I work with a lot of prosumer stuff now. Like I don't work with the free app stuff, but there is a ton out there, right? There's just a ton. Do you know any, Kat?
I'm trying to think. Our phones have, like, if you have an iPhone, and I'm sure an Android will probably have the same thing, but their version of it. But because there is I feel like there's iMovie like on my iPhone, and you can like cut something on your phone.
I the iPhone is pretty stacked, but I know not everybody has an iPhone, right? Even doing, and this is like an old experimental, world thing, but even just doing in-camera editing, it's like, I shoot this, I shoot this, I shoot this, I shoot this, like stop, start. Even if you got old cameras, like it doesn't have to be particularly good quality, right? Like any kind of digital camera, you can do that in-camera editing, and it'll all come out as one piece. Or just if you don't have access to cameras, we all have access to friends, to somebody, and also I know people who've made films crowdsourced online, right? I don't have the names of the sites, but there's places where you can ask for animation, and like somebody across the world will do that, or you need some help with editing. Like there's all of these hive ways of making film on the web for people who don't have all the resources they need, at their fingertips.
No, that's so true. I had something that I was going to ask or say, but I'll get to that. Hopefully I will remember it. But there is another question, and that is, what are your thoughts on the benefits and drawbacks of self-taught filmmaking versus going to film school?
It depends how, self-directed you are. Like film school is fantastic if you can afford it, because you have access to instruction, you have access to equipment, and you have access to a crew, right? Like you're all there for one reason, to make a film. And so it's an extraordinary opportunity, but you don't need to go to film school. Like absolutely not. If you have the wherewithal, like if there's film co-ops, or if you have your own equipment, or beg, borrow, and steal, or if you work on film sets, like if you have jobs and you make friends with people there, and maybe they'll do you freebies, they'll do you favors, right? There's a lot of people who've just worked their way up in the industry, and they get professional crews to give them some time, and they make films on the weekends, and it takes years, but it happens, right? Like there's you totally do not have to go to film school. But if you do, I think that we have a list of potential schools in the, mainly in Vancouver, but across Canada, right? That's not an impediment to making a film. It gives you a culture and a context. and permission, like sometimes it's hard to go, oh, I want to make a film. But you have to give yourself permission to make that time and have that discipline, right?
I was just going to add that I think, finding collaborators and people that, also want to make films is such a, is like a necessary asset when you're, especially when you're emerging, but even, at whatever stage you are in your career, having like a core group of friends who understand what it is that you're going through and who can, who you can borrow equipment for, or you can like send cuts to get advice. I think that's great. And I also don't think that you need to go to film school at all. But I think film school, if you are able to attend to film, if you're able to attend film school, that is one of the bonuses of it, is that you are with like a cohort that you can kind of always ask favors for in the future. But there are also like Cineworks is a great organization here in Vancouver that you can become a member and you can rent out their equipment and use they have a lot of like editing stations, I'm pretty sure, where you can go and edit your film. And so that's a great resource for emerging filmmakers in the city.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's another question here for you. What is the film festival circuit like, and is it a necessary vehicle for wider distribution and or to find a film distributor?
A lot of films that go to film festivals already have a distributor, and I have to say that I go to a lot of festivals when I can, but I have not found distribution through a film festival, right? What's so great is to be able to travel with travel. Nobody's been traveling for the last year, but Window Horses is an autobiography. It's about, she goes to a poetry festival in Iran, but it's like my experience going to film festivals, traveling around the world, sharing with audiences who are all respectful. I mean, here's the thing about school, right? Is that you have a bunch of people sitting around talking about everything in a respectful and interested, open, engaged environment, right? And film school actually, school teaches you how to critique, how to, I keep on saying respectful, but I think it's such a big part of everything we do, right? And it's like that for festivals. People have come to open their minds, to see films that they wouldn't normally see, on TV, or if they went to the cinema. They want to see something. They want to meet the filmmaker. They want to know what is in the filmmaker's head. And it's just fantastic. Like, film festivals are like, sometimes they're the best part, like they're the gravy, they're the reward, like, especially animation, you spend so long by yourself often, right? Like, it can be pretty hermetic, and then you come out in the world with your little darling. I think film festivals are great, but it doesn't mean you're going to sell your film at them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, film festivals, they're mainly to connect and just to celebrate. I feel like it's like the celebration of all the hard work, however many years it took to make the film, and it's just like, oh man, now we can watch the film and I get to watch it with people in a big, this is pre-pandemic obviously, but like watch it in the theater, and you get to celebrate your crew and yourself and what you've created.
Yes, it's so fantastic being in the audience, and also when you can see your film in different cultures, right? And see what resonates across different cultures. It's pretty interesting because there's, so many different touchstones that might be different, It was pretty interesting because I traveled extensively with Window Horses, and it's such a specific film, and everybody all around the world saw the same film. They laughed at the same bits, they cried at the same bits, they were moved by the same bits. It was pretty interesting, and they had the same questions. Everybody had the same questions for the Q&A. The Q&A is really great, right? Like, how great is it for somebody to ask you, why did you make this? What were you thinking? Because you can't put everything in the film too. Like, you got so many other thoughts, and it's just, again, it's another privilege. It's just such a privilege that people care about what you do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who don't know, VIFF is VIFF. We have a bunch of local film festivals here in Vancouver that are amazing. Doxa, VIFF, Women in Film and TV just had their festival.
There's Reel to Reel, the Youth Festival. There's the Asian Film Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of festivals.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, another question here. We have the film industry is a very competitive industry. How do you stand out from the experienced and well-known filmmakers?
Well, you just do what you do. If you're interested, somebody else will be interested. It's like not every, it's like anybody who tries anything. You may not be, the next, Spike Lee or Jane Campion or, whoever, that generation of filmmaker, but you might. And I don't think you should be worried about how to stand out. I mean, you should just do what you do, right? Like if you concentrate on the work will speak for itself. And yeah, like it is true that marketing is a big part of film. Like I don't want to discount that, but I don't think you should necessarily lead with that when you're just getting started. The fact that you're an emerging filmmaker, there's an enormous amount of interest in people just starting out. Like there's people scouting. It's like A&E. It's like the music industry. Like people want to know who the new crop of filmmakers are. And, it's easier to get money as an emerging filmmaker because you don't need as much. I mean, you won't get as much as an experienced filmmaker, but people like to be able to give little seed money. And I mean, even the National Film Board of Canada, right? Like they really like to support emerging filmmakers. And there's a whole bunch of mentorship programs, across the country. Yeah, I mean, TELUS has their Story Hive, which is fantastic, right? My mind's sort of blanking on a bunch of stuff, but I think there's going to be some references put up later. Yeah, how do you stand out? I mean, there's really a bit of magic, there's really a bit of magic. Like if you look at any of the awards, like even the Oscars, right? How many brilliant films are not represented and what is like, it's always it's a little bit of a mystery. I mean, you can't always get like an A-list actor, God, I don't know. I mean, what would you say, Kat? I mean, it's so funny. The film that you're working on now, like you've got like superstar involved, like that makes that film stand out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I guess, I think you just have to be like, I think if you're really passionate about your idea or the film that you want to make, that will resonate with people and people, it's easy to tell. I feel like it's so easy to tell people who are going to make it far in the industry. I think, there's, I was just on another panel at UBC and I could tell there's, I'm going to call them, people who are very like the keeners who had like a lot of questions who are like, and you can just tell that they're super passionate about wanting to make films. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to like remember your name because I feel like you're going places and I can already tell, I can tell that there's so much heart there. And I think if your heart's in it and is in the right place, people will know that.
Yeah. And also people are not asking for permission. Like they are filmmakers, right?
Yeah.
They are filmmakers and they are going to make a film or they are making a film, right? Mm-hmm. They're not asking for somebody to let them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And that's a great, I mean, when I was working at the film board, so I had my day job as the production coordinator, I was like still going home and working on my own personal film so that when I was pitching to Story Hive, and again, for those of you who don't know, TELUS Story Hive is a great resource for emerging filmmakers in British Columbia and Alberta. And, when I had all these meetings, exactly what you said, you kind of have to show that you've been working on your own stuff and you have things to show. So when I was able to get meetings with all these people and I'd be like, well, I have a day job at the NFB, but I'm still but I'm working on my own things. And here's a film that I'm working on. So I think that's super important to continue to just make something and you don't need anyone's permission to continue to do that. So I think that's a really great point.
and also like, I'm doing this presentation and everything, but I'm kind of an introvert, right? Like there is a certain amount of people. You have to show up for yourself, right? You have to show up. You have to meet people. You have to make deadlines. You have to do research. You have to do stuff, But even if it's uncomfortable for you, if that's not really your personality, you'll find that when you have something you really want to make, you'll do it, right? You'll show up for your project, right? You just will.
I love that. Okay, so that's perfect, because we are going to cue in our next film, which is The Magical Life of Long Tack Sam. So we're going to cue that, and then we're going to talk about that right after. Oh, sorry, before we do that, Anne-Marie, is there anything that you want to say?
Oh, are you going to do the one-liner?
Sorry, yes. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. So this is a historical tour through the first part of the 20th century through the prism of Anne-Marie's great-grandfather, globe-hopping vaudeville Chinese acrobat, and magical Long Tack Sam. I love it. So we're just gonna we'll play it, and then we'll come back and chat about it.
This is my great-grandfather, Long Tack Sam. I never met him, never knew much about him. Maybe that's an immigrant thing, not passing on stories. But he seems to be trying to tell me something here, and now I wish I could hear what he's saying. When I was a kid, I knew he was from China, but I'd only seen pictures of him wearing Western clothes. I knew he was very short and liked to smoke a big cigar. And I knew he was a magician. He could make coins appear from behind your ear. Oh, and that he knew Ed Sullivan and Jack Benny and Orson Welles. And he worked with Laurel and Hardy and George Burns and Gracie Allen and Cary Grant. So he was in show business. So what? Who was he exactly?
Let me talk about Long Tack Sam, who was one of the biggest acts in American vaudeville.
Mr. Sun Tai know the history of Long Tack Sam, yeah.
他这是在美国的。
This is in America.
No, he was a magician, and he was Chinese. Everybody went. Yes, that's right.
Well, he was super.
He's a myth.
Yeah, he's a myth. Yeah, he's very famous.
I knew he was very short. Now, I knew he's very big. A magician, an acrobat, with a world-traveling full Chinese review. If he was so famous, why is he forgotten? Why doesn't my family even talk about him anymore? Where did he come from? I went to talk to his son, my great-uncle, who, I realized, I had never asked a personal question to as an adult in my life.
I know nothing about his family at all. I don't know his background at all, and he never wanted to talk about it.
In fact, there was nobody in my family who knew. But once upon a time, Long Tack Sam shared his story with the world.
When I was 5 years old, famine came to our North Chinese country. We were hungry and miserable. A magician came working miracles. He was a famous friend of the spirits. His name was Wang.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. So Anne-Marie, do you want to say a few words before we get into some of the questions that I have for you about this film?
Right. So this is obviously a deep dive into my own family. And what's interesting is that nobody, well, as you saw from the clip, nobody really talked about my great-grandfather in my family. Nobody knew that much. And I had to go outside of my family to get other people interested and then bring that information back and say, see, he is of consequence. Our family history is actually interesting to other people. And, and it made them interested. And it was interesting because the family is very disparate all over the place. And making this film actually brought people together, and gave them a lot of pride in our own history. Later, I was asked to turn it into a graphic novel, particularly for inner city teenagers, immigrants, to teach them value their own stories and perhaps, you know, become interested in their own stories, because a lot of immigrant stories are lost because they're not brought across, either because they're not, you know, they're not something to be celebrated, that people have run from things, or people want to start a new life, or maybe there's a language gap or something. So this became sort of a larger project. And it's interesting because when my grandfather died, I inherited this scrapbook in German, which had all of these clippings of my family, 1933 in Berlin. And because I'd been in Germany, where I first came up with window horses, and I'd learned German, I could read the scrapbook. And that's what started me on this journey, right? So it's all these weird little things. I couldn't have made this film before I made it. It also took forever, of course. But what's also, if you look at it, you know, I've got some moving photographs now. Of course, everybody has moving photographs now. But when that film came out, and that was 2003, that was one of the first and only examples of it, right? Wow. Nobody had used it in documentary yet. Nobody had manipulated photographs. So it's quite actually technically groundbreaking.
I didn't know that. That's very cool. That's super cool to know. As like
if I don't say so myself.
No, I love that part of it. And so, yeah, what I loved about this film is that you literally go everywhere and you interview so many people. So one of my questions was, so when did you first hear of your great grandfather and you know, that he had this career in vaudeville? Was that something that you had to find out like through your own research, or was that, you know, I know you didn't know too much about him, but was that just like common knowledge in your family?
No, it was like not valued, right? It was like, yeah, I knew he was a magician. You thought he did Western magic, right? As I said, like I'd never seen any pictures of him wearing Chinese opera gowns. I had no idea. It was only halfway through my research that I realized that he came from an acrobatic tradition. And that was from meeting a Canadian magician who lived in New York City. It's like, the internet was just starting then when I started my research. There were no libraries online. Like I couldn't just Google, right? I had to actually go someplace, and I didn't really know what I was looking for, right? So I would find one piece here, one piece there, right? And I didn't even know the right questions to ask, right? As I went on researching, as I went on making the films, I would find the questions, right? Like I knew nothing. I was just so ignorant at the beginning of the process.
But you were but you had the presence of mind to film, like because you filmed quite a bit, like in your search.
Well,
so
here's interesting thing, is because I got development money from the NFB, and then they sort of cut me loose after the investigate, right? Like they give you a little bit of money to see, is there a film idea here? And then they give you a little bit more if they like it for development. And then they might take you to production. There's a whole bunch of different stages. And after the first stage, they said, no, not interested, right? And I had spent my little bit of money traveling around, meeting people, and I had a little tiny camera, right? Just a little thing. And I was always going to go back and do the real interviews, right? With a camera crew and make it look all pretty. But no, I just got stuck with my original footage, which were really just snapshots. And I would just put a camera down in the middle of a table while we're having lunch or something, you know, and that's why all the angles are like this, is because I didn't want it to be obtrusive. I didn't want it to be a big deal. I just wanted them to talk to me and not have to worry about the camera. Right, so I was using really rudimentary equipment, right? But then that's what I had. And I thought there was film footage, like I basically went around the whole world looking for film footage of my great grandfather's act, couldn't find it. And so I landed up animating the stills that I did have, or, you know, the illustrations. And this is the first time I worked with other animators, other artists, which of course I've done all the time since then. So it was just, how do I make this film when there's nothing? And then it turns out that animation is the perfect connection between my great grandfather and myself, because I mean, the original films were photographers and magicians coming together, like with the work of Georges Méliès and things like this. Like it's actually, that's the legacy. Like animation is actually the legacy of magic.
That's very cool. So in a way, you're following your great-grandfather's footsteps, which is cool.
Yeah, by accident. And what's so funny is traveling the world with that for film festivals, I was going to all of these theaters where he would have performed in, right? Like, because all of the old vaudeville theaters are film theaters, right?
Yeah, that's
so
really cool.
Super cool. Very, very, very emotional, actually.
Yeah.
It was very emotional making the whole experience of that film.
And so did you have to, we talked about how sometimes telling our family stories is, you know, even there's more responsibility. Maybe it's even, you know, scarier than approaching, you know, someone you don't know. Did you have to get their permission, or how did you approach telling them that you were going to, you know, delve into family history to find more about your great-grandfather?
Well, everybody was really suspicious, right? Like nobody wanted to be filmed. Nobody thought that this was a good idea. And everybody was worried about how the information was going to be used, right? Like the family is quite complicated. and so it took a long time, right? It took a long time. And some of the magicians also, you know, it's like a secret society. So they were also very suspicious about, you know, did I want to steal tricks or learn secrets? And there were people that I chased down literally for years. They kept on putting me off, and I just keep on, you know, writing a letter. Yes, letter writing, or calling them up. You know, they didn't have email. It's pretty old school, but it's so interesting. Let me just show you this. Mm-hmm. There's this one guy in Australia who put me off for 3 years. He put me off for 3 years, and then I just showed up at his door one day, basically. And after the film was finished, he gave me this poem. It's called Persistence, and I have it on my wall all the time. Yeah.
Can you read it? Are you able to share that? Like share the poem?
Yeah. It's an oldie kind of poem. It says, "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, 'Press on,' has solved and will always solve the problems of the human race." And then he signs it. Oh God, it's so faded now. "Sent with affection and sincerity in recognition of your long tack Sam endeavor."
I love that. That's so cool. And I mean, you kind of just have to keep tracking along, and when I'm like trying to find someone or wanting to talk to someone for a documentary that I'm, you know, wanting to make, and someone says no, I just, you know, hold off, but then approach them maybe a few months later, just give them an update and maybe see if they've changed their mind. Or I love what you just did. Just show up, just fly halfway across the world and just show up. They can't really pin you down.
I did have family. I was visiting family, but luckily I've got family all over the world.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So I happen to be in town. Yeah. So, but it's true. If you don't have any track record, and it's like with anything, unfortunately, you do have to prove yourself to some people, right? That you're serious, and that you respect. You respect their time and their knowledge and what they have to share with you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We're just going to open up to some questions now. So I have one here. Would you recommend people tell stories from their own life or make up stories?
Whatever is easiest for you. In some ways, all stories are autobiographical. Like there's a germ of it that has meaning. That's why you want to tell it, even if it's a superhero story, right? Mm-hmm. So I think all art is in some way autobiographical, especially for emerging artists. I think, if you think of painters, portraiture, it's who's going to let you be your own subject? You are. So, I mean, that's kind of like with You Take Care Now, right? Is that I had to I had to do myself before I could interview somebody else, right? So I don't know. I mean, for me, for films, I watch a lot of films, but I have to say I really, really do love nonfiction. I love documentaries. You know, you can't really have anything more magical and bizarre and important than real life in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
my writer's block is with a fiction film, of course.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, you turn the corner soon. But I'm just trying to see what time it is now. We just have a few more minutes, and then we're going to take another break. I'm just wondering what do I? Oh, I did have a question for your film. You Take Care Now, because you were saying that you made that film because you wanted to tell this other story and let that subject know that they weren't alone in the process, and you were willing to put yourself on the line as well. Did that film end up being made? Like, did it all work out in the end?
Oh yeah. Yeah, New Shoes, an interview in exactly 5 minutes. That was also made with the Film Board, actually. It was a part of the 5 Feminist Minutes program to celebrate Studio D when the NFB had actually a women's studio. And it was just remastered and let out again. Let out, that sounds like a pet, but you can see it, New Shoes, an interview in exactly 5 minutes. It's on the NFB website. And also I made a feature that opened the Berlin Festival, also called New Shoes. The little film gets seen a lot more. That's the beauty of short films, is that there's a lot more venues for them than you think, right? It's hard to commit to watching a long film. People's attention spans are really small, often.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and also, yeah, that film gets shown like every December as in the memorial for the Montreal Massacre.
Okay.
Right. And it actually, at the time that my friend was shot and survived, it changed gun laws in Ontario at the time.
Wow.
Like, it was, yeah, it's interesting. I made a lot of films when I was younger that all had to do with violence. I was not aware of it, like whether it's physical violence or sexual violence or even, just communication. It was only over time when I sort of saw my body of work that this was a recurring theme. It wasn't my agenda, but it was, it represented things that were on my mind and things that I had gone through.
We are going to show and talk about our last clip called Old Dog, which I love. So I'll just, the short synopsis, and it is a short one. Old Dog is a study on aging, canine, and other. Anne-Marie, do you want to say a few words before we play the clip? Or should we just roll it and then talk about it after?
Yeah, let's talk about it after.
Okay, perfect. So Katja, if you could play Old Dog, please.
Since his pal Lucy passed away, Henry just wants to be with me. He can't see as well as he used to. Makes him a little anxious. It's okay, bud, I'm right here. He can't hear so good either. He gets cold more easily too now. Never used to bother him when he was younger. Best thing about these socks is not only do they prevent Henry's paws from getting frostbite on the ice, they're also non-skid. Whoa, I could use some of these myself. I started taking out the stroller when we go on walks in the woods and just put him in it when he gets tired. His joints hurt quite a bit. He doesn't usually complain, but he has some trouble getting around now. Phew. He may not have the same appetite he used to have, just as well. He can't burn off calories the way he used to either. He gets confused sometimes and forgets some of the old rules. No barking, Henry. No, Henry, not in the house. He needs a little more grooming these days. With this hip thing, he suffers from incontinence. A good old dog. He doesn't mind either way, I guess, but with these diapers he can sit where he wants, the couch, anywhere. I know, I spoil him, but you know what they say, person's best friend and all that. Come on, Bud, let's go. Want to go for a walk? Me too.
You okay, Dad?
We're good.
I can't believe this is the last film that we're going to talk about. The time just kind of flew by, Anne Marie. So do you want to, I love the story behind this film. So yeah, do you mind just telling us how Old Dog came to be?
Right. Well, there's another Anne Marie Fleming out there, and we keep on getting mixed up with each other. Like ever since there's been an internet, there's been us. And she makes technologies for old dogs, apparently. She was on Dragon's Den. She won like a couple of years ago. And my parents live in England. And every time something happens with the other Anne Marie Fleming, my mother gets sent something. And the year before last, she was sent an article about, this doggy wheelchair. And she goes, that somebody sent to her. And I said, she goes, are you making wheelchairs for dogs? I said, no, I make films. And so I finally went online and found her company. And she had a little blog, a little write-up about working with old dogs, living with old dogs, and how taking care of these animals let her be her best self. Right. And I thought this was just so beautiful because, she had like colorful diapers and little socks and all these things. Because, dogs are so zen. They don't care. They're just old. They're just who they are. Right. But it's people who have this sadness about, about aging. My father, he's got pretty much got a lot of stuff going on, and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago, and I thought what a beautiful way to be able to talk about aging through a dog, because dogs are, not dogs are people too, but dogs as sentient beings, they go through all the same things that we do, right? And I wanted to be able to talk about something that is hard, but with some lightness, and so I called up Anne Marie, and she knew who I was because people used to send her scripts, and so she's sort of been following me for like years, because depending on who's in the news, like we score higher up on the Google searches. So she lives up in 100 Mile House. And so I went up and, she said she'd love to be involved. And again, it sounds like this is all plug for the NFB. I was just going to make this film on my own tiny resources. But I thought it would be great to be in the NFB's library, or maybe the NFB would want to participate in some way, because it seemed like what I wanted to say with the film is something that would be, totally in line with what, with their values. And so indeed, they gave me a little bit of money to make this film. And what's so fantastic about working with somebody like the Film Board, or having a distributor, even with a short film, and I think I'm going ahead to another question, is that they take care of all the applications for you, for all the festivals, they try and find you know, to try and sell the film, all that stuff, that's all off your plate. You just have to worry about film. Now, I don't know one filmmaker who's ever happy with their distribution, right? There's always complaints, always complaints. But I'm pretty happy. I had so low expectations with this little film, right? I just thought somebody's helping me make it, and it'll go out there on the internet and live. And it's actually doing a little bit of a festival life now too. I just want people to be able to see it. And I finished it like split second before our spring lockdown during the pandemic. So it was, it's pretty interesting. And then it didn't come out until late last year. Yeah.
I love it. And so how much of the other Anne-Marie Fleming was involved in the writing process of the story? Or was it, like what was her part in it? Or was it just sort of taking the idea of what she did as her job and making that and creating the story yourself?
Right. Yeah. I just went and I interviewed her and I looked at her dogs, you know, looked at her shop, and she had these two little Frenchies, you know, these two little French bulldogs, and they're both women, and they both lost their partners, and they didn't really get along until they both found themselves solo, and now they're like inseparable friends, right? And that gave me an idea of how to start, you know, the film, that Henry the dog has lost his partner, and now he's like super bonded to, you know, the human in his life. Is that this on the one hand, you know, we're not seeing like changes in ability as loss, but that doesn't mean that there isn't real loss, you know, and that dogs don't feel, you know, that they dogs, well, if anybody has a dog, they know dogs care.
And Anne-Marie, it's your voice at the very end, is that right?
Yes.
And so was this supposed to be like, was that the older man in the film, was that supposed to be like your dad as well then?
Sort of, yeah. That's my little Alfred Hitchcock cameo.
I love it. I totally love it. Yeah. It just made it so much more personable. And so
yeah, I mean, that's where you see the level where the man is caring about the dog, but the daughter is also caring about the man.
Yes. Okay, I got it. I remember when it came out, reading the press release for it. I think the NFB sent it out, and I just thought it was such a cool thing how you connected with this, with this other Anne-Marie Fleming, and it's just, it's such a great story behind the story. So that's very cool. And we can watch the film right on nfb.ca. The nfb.ca is a great resource to watch all of the NFB's films online for free.
Oh yeah, for free. And apparently, I mean, you can download the app for free for your phone. And apparently it's like the most watched film app.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So yeah, there's thousands of films. So for some films you would really like to make money and you'd like it not to be shown for free. But for other films, it's like, just, you know, I would just really like to get it out there. So it's not the whole NFB library, obviously.
And I will say, just to add to that, you know, usually how the film world works, usually you make a film and you do like the film festival circuit. So you apply to film festivals, you hopefully get in and you get to show them. And then hopefully after that, you know, you can find a place for it to live, either like, you know, on Netflix or online on Vimeo, wherever. But I will say that I think there's so much to gain by also just putting your work online as well.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're starting. And just to give some, you know, an example, as another example is just the film that I made a few years ago called Finding Big Country. I was a bit hesitant at first because my contract with Story Hive was that it would go online right away. I was like, it goes against everything that we learn in film school about film festivals, and like, not because as soon as you put it online, you can't apply to some film festivals because I want the world premiere or whatnot. But I will say that having a film that's so easily accessible when you're just starting out is so great, and it's so important just to get eyeballs on your work. to get your name out there, exactly what you've been saying, like just get your name out there, build a following, and build a name for yourself. So a great way to do that is just make something, and just, the internet is such a great tool and resources for emerging filmmakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason not to do it. And like you said, even for festivals, some festivals won't take you, but others will, right?
And yeah.
And certainly there's nothing like seeing your work in a theater, if we're ever allowed to go to theaters again, right? It's quite different than looking at something on your iPhone. I did want to say, because we didn't really talk about all the artists that I work with, that my process for Old Dog is I wrote the script and I did the storyboards, and then I gave it to Kevin Langdale, who I've often collaborated with, and he did the actual animation. And then also Gordon Dirty did the sound design, and Gordon I've known since I was 10, and we've also partnered up on a lot of different films. And so it's interesting, even though my films are all really different and I change it up, you do sort of have a little kind of family that pops in and out.
I love that. Emery, we're just about to head into the Q&A, but I just wanted to throw it back to you if there's any, because we're after the Q&A, I think we're going to close, we're going to have our closing remarks. Is there anything that you want to say to these emerging filmmakers who are watching? Yeah, I'm just going to leave it up to you.
Or
anything, any advice that you want to, that we haven't touched on that you think might be important to share.
For me, the number one best thing about film school, and now you really don't have to go to film school to see it, is stuff like this, like listening to other artists, other filmmakers talk about their process, talk about why they do things. Maybe completely different from what you're interested in, but it's always interesting to hear how other people do stuff and what turns them on and keeps them going. Like, I thought that was the most exciting part about going to film school, is being forced to watch stuff that I wasn't interested in, right? It like totally expanded my mind, and listening to all these people that I wouldn't have taken the time to, right? Like, that's the best. And like, we all have that power now, everything's available on the internet. And the great thing about, Zoom and Facebook Live, and the great thing about the pandemic, if there's one thing, is that things are so much more accessible online than they used to be. You don't have to go to a festival, you don't have to go to school, right? It's there for you. So you're not isolated. And I think that's the big thing, is to know that there is a community. There's a community of like-minded people out there who they want to make work like you, or they want to see work like the work that you want to make.
I love it. Thank you for that. So I'm gonna there's a few questions here that I'll ask you. So the first one is, how much do you shoot to have enough footage and coverage to edit?
Oh, wow. That's such a big question, because it really depends on the work. For animation, right, basically, I try to get as close to one-to-one as possible because, I'm always working with a very small budget, so it's pretty tight, right? When it comes to shooting stuff, it really depends. Like if you're doing a documentary where you don't know what you're going to get, you're just interviewing people, you just shoot. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's so easy to shoot, right? You can easily find yourself shooting 100-to-1, right? And then that is crazy for editing. So, the great thing about oldie days with film is, because it was so expensive, people really were very judicious, right? Like, you make a decision before you turn on the camera. So now you have this great freedom, but it gives you choice, but it also makes it very hard for editing. So I like to go low. And when it comes to takes, I am a person that will just do it in one take, and then someone will insist that I do a safety. But if I'm happy with it, I'll just go with it. Often you find spontaneity happens the first time around. Like, sometimes there's hesitancy, but sometimes something happens and that's not going to happen again. And for, even really good actors, they can do it 12 times. It'll be pretty close, like pretty close. You could have taken the first one. Mm-hmm. So I'm always thinking of budget, and I'm always thinking of time. right? And yeah, and sometimes you just have to, like you have to move on. Like you realize you're not going to get what you want, and you have to move on. So and that's why it's tricky. That's why it's hard to make a good film, because you don't always get what you want. And I think that's a song. But I was talking about someone about this morning, was that dramatic film is so much harder in some ways to make a really great film, right? Because it's like you have this pattern, and it's got to be, you've got a pattern for a dress, say. At the end, you got to make a dress, even though maybe some of the panels are not working, right? You got to make that dress. But with a documentary is that you can start with a dress, but you can come, the dress isn't working, but you can get a really great shoe. Like and maybe that's not the best metaphor, but you know what I mean?
I actually really like that metaphor, and I'm probably going to use it from now on. No, that's so true. You're kind of, with fiction. I mean, with documentary, if it's not working, maybe you can add narration to, like, you know what I mean? Like there are ways to work, to make it work. But yeah, that's a really great metaphor. I like it. 1 second, Anne-Marie. So, and one thing that I will add, which is kind of interesting, is that because of the pandemic, I feel like we've gone back to not necessarily, when people used to shoot with film, like you said, you had to be very exact. Like we need to know exactly what we're getting, because it's expensive, and we don't have, film is not, we don't have, reels and reels and reels of film versus, digital. We can kind of shoot for however long we want, as long as you have big enough hard drives. But what I'm finding with the pandemic, because of all these safety protocols, I'm having to really figure out what I want, so that we're not spending too much time in a place that's not safe, or a story that we actually don't need. So I feel like we've kind of gone back into that framework of really knowing what the creative is, so that we're not wasting, or we're not putting anyone at risk. So it's kind of that same mentality now, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's focus.
Yeah, it's focus.
I mean, it's focus for kind of a horrible reason, but yes, it's interesting, because you're always making choices, and as a director, that's all you're doing. You're just making choices, right? Mm-hmm. So and if you're working with other people, you want to have those things thought out as much as possible, because you are taking up people's time, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's real life. Life is going by.
Yeah. So I just have 2 more questions for you, Anne-Marie. So the first one is, do you think it's necessary to move to a bigger city like LA or Toronto to become a successful filmmaker?
Yes and no. Yes and no. There is a thing about the big fish in the small pond. Some people make that choice. Now it's so easy to make films, right? And you can live where you want, especially for animation. You can live where you want. And you can either, move for projects for a short period of time, or you can do everything online. Like, it is true. It's all about community. I know some people would say, yes, you got to go to LA. Would my life have been different if I moved to LA? Maybe, right? But it's really up to you. It's like, who are you? Like, what kind of person are you? What do you need to feel creative? Like, what do you need to feel safe? Like, some people just love an adventure, right? Like LA is pretty hard. I mean, there's a lot of people who go there to try making film. I mean, most people. So the competition is actually bigger there. In Canada, we have such a great system. I mean, people complain about it, but we have so much government cultural support. I mean, compared to almost anywhere else in the world, it's really incredible, because we're such a diverse and such a loosely populated country, right? To be able to tell our stories, to create a narrative that represents Canada, we need some help. And so I think it's pretty great. Like Vancouver, I've lived in many places around the world, and I want it to be here. Like, it has some drawbacks for sure. Like, it's not the epicenter of some kind of film, but it is more and more for others. I don't really work in the industry per se. I work on my own projects 90% of the time. Yeah, I think you have to be happy, right? Like that's when you're creative. You're creative when you're happy, when you where you're supposed to be. If you have an opportunity, take it, right? There's nothing that's better than shaking it up and going to some place you don't know. And yes, there is just showing up. I mean, that's the thing with film festivals, is you don't know who you'll meet. There's the randomness that that affects everything in life, you know? It's like there's somebody that you won't meet if you're staying in your own, pod, right? It's like, but it's not a decision. I moved to Toronto. And I think that had I not at that point in my life as an emerging filmmaker, I probably would have moved further faster had I stayed in Vancouver.
Thank you for that. We have 1 minute left. Hopefully we can go just maybe a bit over. There's one last question here, and I'll just ask it really quickly. So what are some barriers you have come across as a woman of mixed race? And I know this is
Right. My role models have not always, they're not all women, right? Like, I don't look for permission from women. Like, do I see myself out there? I want to do something and I want to find out how to do it. Like, who has done it? Like, when I talked about Peter Greenaway or Atta Magoyan, right away, oh, a human being has done that. I would like to do that. I mean, I had to give myself permission because, of course, my family was not very supportive of my choices, right? So I had that. I had my own family culture to deal with. I'm an immigrant, right? I was brought up in a Chinese family, like culturally Chinese, right? But you don't see that. As a mixed race person, you can't see my history. You can't make those assumptions about me. I mean, other people look a certain way and people make assumptions about them that are completely wrong. And so that's part of why I want to tell stories, is that I think that, and the thing that I'm all clammed up about now with my writer's cramp is indeed a mixed race story. And it's based on my family, is that it is absolutely it's everything about me. I am mixed. I am mixed culture. I am, my films are hybrid films, you know, like my interests are all mixed up. Like I am, I come from a lot of colonial background, you know, like Australia, living in Canada. I was born in a United Nations dependency. It wasn't even in Japan. There's Hong Kong, right? Like I am almost stateless. I don't have a native birth. I don't have a native passport, right? So I'm really interested in, I know I'm talking too long, but is it harder to be a woman in the world right now still? Yes, there are some challenges, right? And it's no different in film. There's all this affirmative action stuff happening. It's great. I think the tide is actually changing. There's way more representation on all levels, right? It's fantastic. It's such an exciting time. You know, it's like it's good. You know, it's never been bad for me. I've had my own challenges, right? But now I think there's such a great opportunity for women, for people of all, you know, cultures, for all different levels. Like you don't have to be a rich person to be a filmmaker, you know. Like I think it's getting more and more democratic. It's an exciting time to want to make film. I mean, I think it's still film, you know, media, to make media. I still think it is not just the art form, but our communication form of our time still.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end. So thanks, Anne-Marie, for sharing all your insight, wisdom, and all your films with us.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. Thank you so much to Kat and Anne-Marie for hosting. So after tonight's event, Miscellaneous Productions will continue with our full digital season of arts programming, mostly geared toward youth and emerging artists, and all programs are free to participate. In March and April, we will continue with Music 101, hosted by musicians Tanya Aganova, Robin Lane, and Jaya Story, with 3 more free sessions exploring the realities of a life in the music industry. We will also be continuing a fabulous new program, Distance Hats, with 2 more sessions in March for youth from age 9 and older. Distance Hats is another series of fun-filled free workshops conducted as part of the creation of Miscellaneous Productions 2022 to 23 theater work play. The project continues with the distribution of 200 art kits to representative youth groups in British Columbia. Participating youth will engage via Zoom with professional artists to create imaginative big hats, each relating to youth's interpretations of fairy tales and folklore from their own cultures and from their imaginations. In April, Miscellaneous Productions is launching a new street dance music video with choreography by Natasha Gori, featuring a representative, talented group of dancers with music by Natasha Peko, called I Ain't No Superman, which originated in our 2019 production of Away with Home. For more information, please go to our Facebook page or visit our website at www.miscellaneousproductions.ca. Thank you so much to Marie Fleming, to Kat Jamie, to our fabulous staff and board, and our lovely audience. Thank you and have a great evening.